A weathered old cemetery where the ghosts of a man and his loyal dog play among the graves. A historic hotel harboring the spirits of guests who checked in but never really checked out. And terrifying campus legends surrounding one of the most famous universities in the world await on this journey through some more of Indiana's most haunted places. Let's jump right in. Hey guys, and thanks for joining me on another journey through some more of Indiana's most haunted places. Recognized for its iconic historic landmarks, sprawling state forests, unique culture, and more, the Hoosier State is also infamous for its classic ghost stories and old hill folklore sure to send shivers down your spine. Are you ready to get rolling? Our first haunt takes us to the heart and center of the state and has us touring the Indiana State House. The Indiana State House, which is situated in the heart of Indianapolis, is the state capitol building and center of Indiana government, which houses the Indiana General Assembly alongside offices for the governor of Indiana and staff, as well as the Indiana Supreme Court. That's bounds are a very popular sightseeing option for both locals and tourists alike, and that's shrouded in a number of classic ghost stories and tales of strong paranormal activity. Historically, through Indiana's past, 3 other locations would act as state houses predating our current state house. However, as the region's population grew from 1876 to 1877, the third of such state houses was condemned and razed, after which, construction of our current state house was approved and started right atop its remains circa 1880. Nearly $2 million and 8 years later, by 1888, our current state house was completed. Through construction, a team of commissioners was utilized in the planning process and included Thomas A. Morris, who was actually a Civil War general and civil engineer. Now, this team would construct the State House with a solid foundation as to ensure it stayed standing for many generations to come, and would implement an interior graced in Italian Renaissance style, with most of its materials sourced locally right from Indiana. Incidentally, its doors were created from Indiana oak, while Indiana limestone from regional quarries was utilized for the bulk of the building process. Interestingly enough, the site was also wired for electricity despite the fact that Indianapolis hadn't achieved a power grid at that point. Following the completion of this structure, its pinnacle would reach 256 feet, marking it as the second tallest building in the state at the time. Oh, and on a side note, a hole was ground into the structure's cornerstone, in which a time capsule complete with 42 important items including government reports, a Bible, crop samples, coins, local maps, newspapers, pamphlets, and a book on the history of Indianapolis was placed. More recently, in 1984, the Capitol building was added to the National Register of Historic Places. In 1988, the administration of Governor Robert D. Orr would propose a total renovation of the State House to the Indiana General Assembly as part of the Hoosier Celebration of '88, as well as for the building's 100th anniversary. This proposal was eventually approved, and an $11 million renovation that lasted until 1995 would see the State House's stonework polished, its woodwork repaired or replaced entirely, and fractures in its iconic central dome skylight fixed up. Additionally, new lighting was added, and most interior walls were repainted. In the present, the State House remains open to the public, and full touring options are offered throughout the week, with limited tours also offered over the weekends. Chillingly, the halls of this old State House have long been shrouded in tales of ghostly activity, and both visitors and officials that frequent its bounds have told of doors that open and close on their own, of instances of personal electronics behaving erratically or outright dying on full charges, and of the phantom smells of cologne or tobacco smoke without source. On the 3rd and 4th floors, an ominous black orb has been known to follow those walking alone. A spectral woman with long brown hair has been sighted in the lobby, and one more popular tale claims that long ago, a horse that was hitched outside of the Capitol reared up and kicked someone, resulting in their death, and that to this day, you can still hear a ghostly neighing, followed by an impact and hoofbeats right near the entrance. Easily the most famous State House ghost story tells of a mail clerk who worked at the Capitol long ago, and who, while pushing his cart along the 4th floor, accidentally toppled over the railing and fell to his doom. Ever since this fateful day, many who have walked the 4th floor tell of hearing the squeaking of mail cart wheels emanating from nowhere, and several have sworn to have witnessed a figure falling over the railing that always vanishes right before his moment of would-be impact below. Our second haunt has us traveling a short skip to the northeast of Indianapolis and takes us on a hike through the positively ancient Mounds State Park. Mounds State Park, which is placed out of Anderson, Indiana, is a beautifully scenic 251-acre park expanse toting a wide range of trails, educational plaques and signs, and a total number of 10 known earthen mounds that were created by tribes native to the region. That's bounds told a long history of native legends and tales of ghostly encounters. Historically, the mounds within our current park were created circa 250 BCE by the native Adena tribe, who were a late archaic people. It's speculated that the Adena settled through the area and used these mounds as a center for their primitive civilization, utilizing the lush surrounding forest as a place to hunt, fish, and prosper, and that they likely remained present on-site for around 500 years or so. Now, it's typically believed that the mounds were used primarily as ceremonial center points. However, it's also been theorized that they were a place where early politics and social issues were settled and discussed. Additionally, all 10 mounds bear bonds to various stars, planets, or constellations, and archaeologists who have excavated throughout the area have discovered a slew of artifacts, including copper for beads, mica for carved stones, obsidian, and seashells, the bulk of which that indicate a society far more complex than previously imagined, as well as a potential trade network. While it's still unknown why the Adena left the mounds, with standing theories ranging from war to disease to natural disaster, following their habitation, the area was left basically abandoned. Aside from other primitive traveling parties who may have passed by the weathered remnants of what was probably once a great ancient city, all the way up through the 19th century when a German family called the Bonnenberg settled near and eventually purchased lands containing the mounds. Notably, this family would recognize the cultural and historical significance held within these earthen constructs, and they would begin their own privatized efforts to preserve the site while attempting to uncover its mysteries. In 1905, the Bonnenbergs would lease 40 acres of their land to the Indiana Union Traction Company, who would go on to establish an interurban stop alongside an amusement park which was placed between the Great Mound and the bluffs of the White River, the latter of which that offered a wooden roller coaster, a merry-go-round, a river float, and more. Subsequently, this amusement park would operate up through 1929, after which it was closed down in the shadow of the Great Depression, and the state began looking into further preservation efforts. Following the 1929 stock market crash, the property was sold off to the Madison County Historical Society, who in turn helped the site earn state park status the following year in 1930, after which it was turned over to the state of Indiana, who would allow extensive archaeological research and who would ensure the mound's ongoing preservation. More recently, in 1973, the whole of the area was added to the National Register of Historic Places. In the present, Mounds State Park remains a popular tourist destination and accommodates somewhere around 400,000 visitors each and every year, while also playing host to a number of group hikes, tours, and events such as floats down the White River. Now, as far as ghost stories surrounding this old mound site go, regional lore namely focuses on the site's ancient history and ties to the Adena culture, and those who have explored the park, especially after nightfall, have reported ghost lights that bob through the trees, disembodied voices heard speaking ancient languages, phantom footsteps that cut through the brush, and terrifying instances in which cars refuse to start, leaving their occupants stranded in the forest overnight. The most famous tales surrounding the mounds have to do with the native cryptids, the Pukwudgies, which are described as 2 to 3 feet in height and as looking like a porcupine from the back and like a half-troll, half-human from the front. While these little creatures are usually confined to Wampanoag culture, sightings around the mounds area predate its recognition as a park, and one archaeologist, Paul Startzman, actually wrote an entire book on encounters with them through history, including one of his own, in which he came face to face with what he described as a small person about half his size, with blonde, spiky helmet-like hair. Incidentally, this book was sold in the park's gift shop for many years, and others still tell of similar encounters. Disturbingly, while Pukwudgie run-ins are often described as purely mischievous in nature, these surprisingly dangerous little monsters are also said to use their shape-shifting and voice-mimicking powers to lure unsuspecting men to their deaths, and they've been attributed to several disappearances through the region. Our third haunt takes us to the south-central end of Indiana and has us checking in at the iconic French Lick Springs Hotel. The French Lick Springs Hotel, which is located in French Lick in Orange County, Indiana, is an iconic historic lodging that was formed around an old belief in the healing properties of its mineral waters that draws in countless visitors each year, and its premises is shrouded in a number of chilling ghost stories and local legends. Historically, lands now holding our current hotel building initially played host to a salt lick that became popular amongst wild animals, and incidentally, early native tribes would frequent its grounds for easy hunting opportunities. Later, following the arrival of European settlers through the 18th century, hunters and trappers would utilize the lick for the same reason, and French traders would begin operating out of the region, resulting in the site being named French Lick, with some stories claiming that American military officer George Rogers Clark actually came up with the moniker when he was camped out there during his expedition of 1786 to 1787, and may have derived it from another site located along the Cumberland River in Tennessee. In 1826, for a time, Indiana's state government would attempt to mine salt from the area, but its deposits weren't sufficient for a large-scale operation. And later, in 1832, brothers Thomas and William Bowles would purchase 1,500 acres of land locally, which included the nearby mineral springs. William, who was a prominent physician, theorized over the healing properties of the springs and began selling mineral water that he called Pluto water, and that was purported to heal close to 50 ailments. And circa 1845, he would construct an inn on site that would eventually come to be known as the French Lick Springs Hotel. Now, preceding his deployment to the front lines of the Mexican-American War, William would lease this hotel out to fellow physician John A. Lane for 5 years, under the stipulation he expand and enlarge the operation. And through the early 1850s, Bowles would resume management of his establishment for a time, before, through the 1860s, leasing the site out once again, but this time to one Dr. Samuel Ryan. Incidentally, Ryan would manage hotel operations for Bowles and his family until William's passing in 1873. Over subsequent years, the French Lick Hotel was either rebuilt or enlarged to a 2.5-story frame building. Through the early 1880s, it was sold to Hiram E. Wells and James M. Andrews. And from the 1880s through the 1890s, the partners would develop the site into a popular health resort. Over the years, the hotel would change hands a number of times, until 1897, when sadly, the main hotel was burned to the ground in a large fire, after which it would be rebuilt on a much larger scale to form our current French Lick Hotel. In 1901, the site was sold to an investment group spearheaded by politician and former mayor of Indianapolis, Thomas Taggart. By 1905, Taggart would buy his partners out, and over the next few decades, he would spend his years transforming the old lodging into a luxury resort. Unfortunately, following the Wall Street stock market crash of 1929, the resort would begin to fall into decline. In 1946, Taggart would sell the property to a group of New York investors, and in 1954, it would again be sold to Sheraton Hotels. Later, in 1979, Sheraton would sell again to the Cox Hotel Corporation of New York, who in turn would sell to Kenwood Financial in 1986, after which it was sold to the Luther James family in 1991, to Boykin Lodging in 1997, and finally to the Cook Group in 2005. In the present, the French Lick Springs Hotel remains open and spans around 2,600 acres, while hosting its lodgings, cabins, a casino, restaurants, boutique shops, a spa, conference center, and much, much more. With such a lengthy history, it should really come as no surprise that the whole of the French Lick Hotel is rumored to harbor its fair share of ghostly guests, and those who have stayed within its bounds have reported lights that turn on and off by themselves, extreme cold spots felt through temperature-controlled spaces, and odd commotions heard from rooms that should be vacant. One more popular story tells that long ago, a beautiful bride who was left at the altar ended up taking her own life in one of the bathtubs across the property. Now, while the room number in which this happened is still up for debate, a number of guests from various rooms have reported terrifying instances in which they turn to find their bathtubs filled to the brim with blood that's there one moment and gone again in the blink of an eye. Easily the most famous French Lick scary story tells that the ghost of none other than the aforementioned Thomas Taggart himself still lingers across the site. Now, as it's told, Thomas's spirit is a pleasant one, and he's been sighted through the lobby, in various hallways, and near the service elevator. It's believed Taggart's spirit remains in the place he loved in life, and that he's simply ensuring the hotel prosper and that its services are up to his standards. And on to number 4, which takes us to western Indiana and has us visiting the quiet and serene Highland Lawn Cemetery. The Highland Lawn Cemetery, which is located in the city of Terre Haute in Indiana, is a city-owned, traditional garden burying grounds boasting over 45,000 interments. That sweeping expanse totes beautifully designed architecture and markers, and that's often tied to a number of local legends and ghost stories ranging from chilling to rather heartwarming. Historically, the city of Terre Haute actually claims 2 cemeteries, the older of which is the Woodlawn Cemetery, which stretches 40 acres and dates back to 1835. Now initially, the first and earliest city cemetery, which was located off of what is now known as 6th and Ohio Streets, was formed through the turn of the 19th century with the establishment of the city. However, as the community quickly grew, it was realized that more space for burials would be needed, and the tract of land now holding Woodlawn was purchased shortly predating its formal creation, after which bodies from the previous yard were actually dug up and reinterred at Woodlawn. While Woodlawn would serve its purpose faithfully for many years, eventually, and in the shadow of exponential growth, it was realized that Terre Haute would likely need more space for burials. And through the 1800s, the city would begin searching for additional land that they could procure for a new burying ground. Incidentally, Highland Lawn Cemetery was formally established in 1884 on a plot of 139 acres, and it would see its first burial on October 29th of the same year, when one Samantha McPherson, who was only 30 at the time of her passing, when she succumbed to typhoid fever, was laid to rest within its bounds. In 1893, the yard's chapel was constructed under architect Jesse A. Vrida in the Richardsonian Romanesque style, and a year later, in 1894, the Heinrich Company would design and erect the bell tower, after which the graveyard's gateway arch was contracted to Edward Hazeldine, alongside the establishment of a rest house. In 1909, the old interurban trolley car waiting station was constructed, and eventually, this structure was converted into what we now know as the cemetery's office. Over subsequent decades, a number of landscaping and modernization projects involving both the cemetery's buildings and grounds would be welcomed. From 1987 to 88, the old chapel was completely renovated, and in 1991, the whole of the site was added both to the National Register and the State Registry of Historic Places. Now, alongside being recognized as one of the most beautiful cemeteries in the country, Highland Lawn Cemetery actually stands as Indiana's second largest burying ground. Its expanse boasts ridiculously romantic landscapes, complete with winding pathways, artfully placed trees and shrub clusters, lakes, vistas, and more. Additionally, it totes exquisite statuary and artful funerary pieces unparalleled in most other graveyards of its type, and the property is maintained dutifully by the city to this day. In the present, Highland Lawn remains open to the public and continues to offer end-of-life services across its positively breathtaking bounds. As with most cemeteries across the world, Highland Lawn is no stranger to tales of the otherworldly, and many who visit its bounds each year report shadowy figures sighted across the yard after dark, disembodied voices heard emanating from thin air, and phantom footsteps that seemingly follow the living at great lengths. One more famous Highland tale tells the story of Martin Sheets, a businessman who passed on through the early 1900s. As it's told, Sheets was absolutely terrified of being buried alive, resulting in him designing a custom casket with latches on the inside just in case, and in an emergency phone being installed in his mausoleum, which he actually paid to stay in service for years following his passing. Sadly, years after his death, his wife was later found dead at home from an apparent stroke, clutching her phone in her hand in what was believed to be an attempt to call for help. However, when she was laid to rest next to Martin in their tomb, the real shock came when the groundskeeper discovered that the phone within his tomb was off its hook. It's believed to this day that Martin, or maybe his ghost, called his wife, and that the terror was just too much for her old mind to handle. Lastly, easily the most famous Highland tale tells the story of one John Heinel and his friendly, viridian-eyed bulldog, Stiffy Green. Following Heinel's passing in 1920, the duo's bond was so unbreakable, it said that Stiffy refused to leave his master's mausoleum. Incidentally, those who cared for the dog would bring him food and water, but no matter how hard they tried, Stiffy simply wouldn't leave his late master's side. Eventually, the hound passed on right on the step of the tomb from old age, but that's not where the story ends. To this day, countless are reports of those who have encountered the spirits of Heinel and old Stiffy, together in the afterlife, playing amongst the graves in eternal bliss. Last but not least, our fifth and final hunt lands us on the far northern end of Indiana, and has us touring the prestigious University of Notre Dame. The ever-iconic University of Notre Dame, which is placed in St. Joseph County in Indiana, is a private Catholic research university spanning 1,261 acres across an unincorporated community sharing its name. Its bounds offer a wide array of degree pathways, and that ties itself to a number of age-old campus legends and stories of encounters with the supernatural. Historically, Notre Dame's history starts with the very first Catholic priest ordained in the United States, one Stephen Baden, who arrived to the area circa 1830 to minister the local Potawatomi, after which he would acquire some 524 acres locally. And in 1842, the church would offer this land to one Edward Sorin of the Congregation of the Holy Cross. Under the stipulation, he established a college on site within the following 2 years. Subsequently, Sorin would ship in 8 Holy Cross brothers from France and Ireland, and on November 26th of 1842, he would begin teaching classes out of Baden's old log chapel. Over the years, Sorin would order the creation of additional campus buildings, including the Old College, the first church, and the first main building. And in 1844, what is officially Notre Dame de Lac would receive its college charter from the Indiana Grand Assembly. Under the guidance of Administrator William Corby, enrollment at Notre Dame would boom. From 1865 to 66, a new main building was constructed. By 1869, the site would welcome the addition of a law school, and in 1873, a library would be added to the main building. Sadly, in 1879, this second main building and library would be destroyed in a fire, after which construction of a third main building, which is actually our current Old Main, was started. Notably, during the school presidency of Thomas E. Walsh, which lasted from 1881 to 1893, a host of new scholastic programs would be added, as would the implementation of a football program, which would act as a catalyst for the now infinitely popular college team, the Fighting Irish. Through the turn of the century and the early 1900s, Notre Dame would continue to expand exponentially and would welcome not only a range of programs, new structures, dorms, and the like, but also more sports teams, art programs, and events. And by the mid-1920s, enrollment had increased to more than 2,500, of which over half lived right on campus, with a major driving force for its growth being none other than its renowned old football team. Oh, and in 1924, one of the most violent and, if I do say so myself, awesome incidents to transpire on campus occurred when the Ku Klux Klan attempted to hold a racist and anti-Catholic rally at the school, to which students responded by amassing a veritable army, which blocked the Klan into trains they arrived in at the South Bend station, and it proceeded to beat Klansmen into submission while ripping their white Klan clothing to shreds. These students' actions would ultimately act as a turning point that eventually led to the downfall of the Klan in Indiana. So, go Fighting Irish. Through the 1930s and 40s, the school would begin to welcome in both intellectuals and refugees from far and wide, while further expanding its programs, campus, and constructing the Notre Dame Stadium. Through World War II, school president Charles L. O'Donnell would offer up various facilities for use by the military, and from 1946 to 1952, school president John J. Kavanaugh would work to reshape academic standards to accommodate a growing student body, all the while funding new facilities for various avenues of research. More recently, from the 1950s through the 1980s, and under the presidency of Theodore Hesburgh, Notre Dame would see its greatest era of expansion and modernization, with its operating budget rising from just over $9 million annually to well over $176 million, and enrollment numbers reached up to 10,000. Notably, through the late 60s, the school would become fully coeducational. Now, unlike other colleges I've covered, Notre Dame actually had female graduates since around 1917 or so, but a large number of its programs were still geared towards traditionally male-dominated professions. This official change would allow total equality in degree options. From the 1990s and into the present, and under President Edward Malloy, and later John I. Jenkins, Notre Dame has continued to grow and prosper. It offers around 75 degree programs, accommodates a student body of around 13,000, and retains its status as one of the most beloved and prestigious colleges in the US, if not in the world. Like many other universities we've covered, Notre Dame is no stranger to age-old campus legends, with each generation of alumni passing down these traditional tales of the otherworldly to the next. One of the most famous of said fables involves the aforementioned Edward Sorin, who founded the school. As it's told, Sorin passed away on Halloween of 1893, and the spirit of the old reverend, not wanting to leave his flock untended, might still be hanging around. Incidentally, a ghostly figure matching that of Sorin has been spied all across campus, usually watching students from a distance with a smile, and many believe his soul lingers to forever protect the school and its grounds from forces that may want to do it harm. In the South Dining Hall, many have told of disembodied moaning, clapping, and flashes of light. In Columbia Hall, reports detail the sounds of galloping horses and close calls with apparitions of Potawatomi warriors. And in St. Liam Hall, mysterious 911 calls have been recorded at night when it's completely closed down, while others have told of sightings of ghostly nuns. Washington Hall is surrounded by several ghost stories, including that of the entity of a steeplejack who fell to his death during its construction, and whose footsteps can still be heard across the rooftop, and the friendly spirit of a former professor named Jim Manavis, who also passed away within the building, has been known to entertain students with the pleasant sound of a French horn or trumpet that emanates from thin air. Additionally, in 1946, one brother Canute Lardern would pass on within Washington while watching a movie, and to date, multiple late-night janitors have spied his form around the area, and an unidentified, slightly threatening presence there has been known to cause objects to fly from shelves, doors to slam, and has even pushed or pinched several students. Lastly, another more popular legend revolves around former Fighting Irish football star George the Gipper Gip. Sadly, through the winter of 1920, George stayed out just a bit too late, and when he returned to his dorm, he found it locked up for the night, resulting in him having to sleep out on the front step and contracting pneumonia and strep throat. The Gipper would end up succumbing to these ailments, but right before he passed on, when the coach visited him in the hospital, his famous last words were as follows: "When the team is up against it, when things are wrong and the brakes are beating the boys, ask them to go out there with all they've got and win just one for the Gipper. I don't know where I'll be then, but I'll know about it, and I'll be happy." Today, it's still customary for both players and students to use the phrase, "win one for the Gipper," and the spirit of old George has been sighted all across campus, as well as on the field or in the bleachers right before games start. Thanks for joining me on this journey through some more of Indiana's most haunted places. If you enjoyed hearing my histories and ghost stories, subscribe to my channel, throw this upload a like, and remember to share me with anyone you think could use a good scare. I'll catch you all next time, and stay spooky.